Hello everyone, I'm Miguel Prot, and like you, I'm enrolled in Web Frontend Development 1, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about JSON versus XML. Okay, let's start with what is JSON? JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, is a text-based data format and exists as a string and can be stored in its own file with the file extension JSON or .json. It's very similar to the JavaScript object format, and we're going to see a little bit the syntax in a while. And JSON can include the basic data types like strings, numbers, arrays, booleans, and other objects literals. And we're going to see a few of these data types in the example that we're going to see. The JSON, like XML, is a interchange languages that its data format is independent of any hardware or language. Then is one of the main use for the JSON files is to transmit data between the servers, the web applications, and I think that is one of the most used in these times. The XML file is extensible markup language. It is very similar to the HTML file. We have tags, we have IDs, even we can use classes or data values. Is primarily to send and store raw data and information. Is is really easy to understand by humans and computers for the tags. We can read the tags and we can imagine what that value is. Consists from a structure like values, elements, and attributes, and like I said, is very similar to HTML. And let's see a little bit about where we can use XML file. We can use the XML file to when we are trying to represent structured information like data, configuration, transactions, and two of that kind of information is using the XML files. And I'm going to develop a small practice, and we're going to learn a little bit about the structure of the JSON. I create this small JSON file. Like you can see, we have an object of users, and always we're going to use this format, and we need this symbol to separate the name and the value. And we are creating different users, and each user have the same values inside, like like our name, last name, age, and sex. And we have two different users right here. And I create also the XML version of this same information. In the JSON file, we need to start with these symbols, and to create the XML file, like like I said in like I said before, we need to specify that this file will be an XML file. Like in HTML, we have the doc type. Here we have the XML tag, and we are when we use this tag, then we are saying that the rest of the file will be XML information. And I create these tags. You can create different tags that you need. For example, if you are talking about animals, you can create another tag animals, and you need to open and close the tag animals, and you can put inside the the value, for example the lion, or you can create another element inside, like the user, inside the user's tag. And you can use the IDs, you can use classes or data values. But let's talk a little bit about how we can use this in our web applications. um, I create this very basic HTML file with just a few styles to separate, and I create a container that contain two different divs, one with the ID JSON and the another with the ID XML. With this function, we're starting to run the JavaScript code when the page is loaded. Then I create these variables. The first one is the URL to access the JSON file, and the second one is to access for the XML file. And we're going to use the fetch API that we learned the last week, I guess. And we're going to use fetch, and we're going to pass the request URL. We're going to start with JSON, request JSON, and then the premise. When we get the response, we're going to manage the response, and we need to specify, like, we are receiving a JSON.json that this will let us manage the files or the information in a better way. And let's start to create a function that will receive the response or data, and we're going to print what is happening. Let's use a console.table to look in a better way, and we're going to print data. Okay, this should work. And okay, we got it right here. Console table data. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Okay, we got it. And okay, this response is getting basically all this, and this is an object that contains two different elements. For that reason, in the table we only have users and the element 1 and the element number 2. We're going to create a variable const equal to users that will contain data.users, and now we can print users, and we're going to see the values for each user, yeah, like you can see, and the index of the specific user. Okay, let's start to code. Now we're getting right here the information, and it's very simple to manipulate this information. For example, I'm going to put this information inside the div with the ID JSON, and for that we're going to create an element. Let element equal to document.getElement by dot create element, create element h3, and we're going to save the information inside the element dot text content, and we're going to put just the name and the last name together. Full name will be equal to the users. Okay, well, we need to to use the users inside a for loop or for each. I'm going to use a for each dot for each, and for each user inside the users we're going to use it. Okay, now we got it. And now we're going to use the user dot name and user dot last name, and let's append this inside the JSON div that will be container will be equal to document.get element by id JSON, and now we're going to save the new element inside the JSON, and we're going to do it by using the append child. Okay, then container dot append child and the element. Let's see, and we got it right here. Now we have the both users inside the div. Now we are using the information from the JSON inside our web application by getting across the fetch API. And now we're going to create another fetch function just to do the same but with the XML file. And okay, then we're going to do the same. Response equal to response.json, and okay, with the data we're going to use an log data. Okay, like you can see, we're getting an error inside the promise because it says uncode in promise syntax unexpected and show this symbol because the method.json is trying to get this structure, and we are getting this structure from the XML that is very different, and then we can't use this method, but we can use the text method. And like you can see, we are getting all the information from the XML file in a plain text. Now we need to manage that information to use it inside our web application. And to do that, we need to parse that text plain text to create a DOM element or an element that can be used by the DOM. Then to do that, we're going to use the parse let parser equal to new DOM parser, and we can run it in one line, I guess. And we're going to create another variable that will be XML doc that will contain the parsed information from the XML, and is parser dot parser from a string, and I will need to pass the string that will be data and the data type that will be text XML. And now if we print the XML doc variable XML doc, we should receive the DOM element with these XML values. And here we are getting now the structure, but is now a DOM element that we can manipulate inside our code. And we I couldn't use the for each because it's not an array, but what I did was use a for loop to create let index 0 while index is smaller than, okay, let's try to save this. Now from this element user that contain the single users, we're going to create a variable const that will be users equal to XML doc, and we need to get all the users inside that XML doc variable, and we can use the get element by tag name, and we're going to get all the users to get these two different users. Then the tag name needs to be user. And now in the for loop, if the I is smaller than the users dot length, then index plus plus, and now const user that will contain the value for each single user will be users index, and let's print just the user and let's see what happens. Okay, sorry, it's index right here, and here we go. Now we get the two different elements, and how we can use this information inside our web application. Well, we use the same logic than when we are using the JSON file, but now we need to use another format to get the values. And I'm going to create an element equal to document dot create element h3, and element dot text content will contain now the different values. Let's type the same. Full name will be, and the first one will be the name, and the second one will be the last name. But what do we need to put inside these spaces? Well, we're going to call the user variable, and we're going to get by a specific tag name. If we want the name, then we need to specify that we want that tag name. We're going to get element by tag name. We need to get first the name, and specify that we're going to get the first element that the JavaScript found, and we need to specify that we want the value inside the tags. Then, like in a regular DOM element, we need to use the text content, and we're going to use the same to the last name, but we need to change the tag name for the last name. Okay, now we need to append the value inside the div with ID XML. Then I'm going to create another variable that will be container XML equal to document.get element element by ID, and will be the XML. Okay, and now we're going to append the element inside this container. Then container XML dot append child, and we're going to pass the element, and we got it right here. It is exactly the same. We are doing exactly the same in both squares, but we are using different files. We are using, in the first example, the JSON file, and in the second one the XML file. Like you can see, could be a little bit more code to manage the information from an XML. For that reason, one of the most used is the JSON, because it is more simple to use and manipulate all the information that the JSON contains. And the XML also is used, but maybe for another types of situations. But it is very good to have the knowledge of both, because we have, maybe we can get the code or the web application from another person, and we need to try to repair it or improve it. And to know this information can help us a lot to determine what we need to use inside our own applications. And well, guys, I hope that you learn, like me, a lot from these different topics, and you can choose whatever you prefer. And I hope you learn too much like me. Bye, guys.